global business news from the boardroom or grassroots. Aaron Heslehurst cuts through the jargon to add colour, depth and context. With live reaction from Wall Street and Asia, studio interviews with top CEOs and the latest innovations in technology. Talking business on BBC World News.
That's the bell ringing on Wall Street right now, and that means the US markets are open. And of course, we are live across the globe. Hello, everybody. It's time. It's time for the money news that matters. I'm Aaron Heslehurst, and this is Talking Business. Hey, let's take a look at the top story. Google searches for answers after the European Union comes up with a $5 billion fine. Yeah, the Silicon Valley giant has been found to have used its Android smartphone system to illegally dominate internet search, but says it's going to appeal. We're going to be hearing from this expert right here who says big fines make big headlines, but effective remedies make a difference. We'll find out if there's a remedy. Also, coming up on the program, tackling Trump on trade, we're going to hear from one American state trying to woo foreign investors despite the president's erratic actions, which it says are undermining its efforts. As always, every day we'll bring you all the action on the global markets. And how do you succeed where others stutter? Yeah, we're going to find out which personality traits can help you stand out from the crowd and shine at work or in business with a psychologist who's using science to improve performance. All of that coming up on this edition of Talking Business. Hey, good morning, America, evening, Asia, hello, world. Welcome to the program. I'm back. Hey, Google has been slapped with a record fine by the European Union in certainly what is considered a landmark judgment. Let's take a look at the details, because the Silicon Valley giant, it's been handed a fine of just over $5 billion for abusing its dominant position in mobile internet search. Yeah. Now, the case centers on the restrictions that Google placed on smartphone makers who wanted to use its Android operating system, such as pre-installing its Chrome browser and paying for Google search to be, well, pre-installed. And Google's dominance of mobile internet searches, it's pretty clear, isn't it? It now accounts for almost 97% of all mobile searches in Europe. But Google says it's going to appeal this huge fine and has disputed the EU's assertions by stating that Android has created more choice for everyone, not less. Bam, let's get rid of the cube. Okay. Let's go and speak to Siobhan Rath, who is CEO and co-founder of Foundem.co.uk. Great to have you with us, Siobhan. Hey, I want to start off this. Didn't Google have a point? Google said, hey, it's free, and if you don't want to use us, swipe another one. Yeah, swipe us away and bring another one in.
Absolutely, but the Commission's statistics show that on Android across Europe, where Google is pre-installed and put on the home screen, 95% of searches are on Google, whereas if you go to another smartphone where Google is not pre-installed, less than 25% of searches happen on Google. So that shows that this really is quite an effective strategy to lock people in and stop them discovering alternatives.
But won't most people say, hey, I use Google because it's the best out there? They do a great job at what they do. It's on the tin.
And today it might well be the best out there, but what this decision does is it clears the roadblocks so that in the next 6 months or 6 years, you're free to discover and start using some revolutionary new search engine. This is all about protecting its monopoly.
So have we lost out on innovation? Then,
oh, you definitely
we're
have.
Losing out.
You definitely have. And in particular, you've lost out on innovation because of Google's search manipulation. So the search decision that was last year, that was about Google within its search engine manipulating its results to put its own additional services such as travel search, comparison shopping, local search, very comprehensively at or near the top of its search results, while demoting more relevant or more innovative competitors out of contention onto page 4. So you've definitely lost out on innovation over that.
They do this in Russia. The Russian competition watchdog forced Google to do this, didn't they? And we've actually they've seen some pretty decent results in others climbing the ladder.
Exactly. So embarrassingly, we're a little bit behind Russia. But if a comfort for the Europeans is that we're still way ahead of the Americans, because of course the Americans they haven't really looked into this at all, and the small investigation that they did have, they closed down in 2013 with not even a slap on the wrist but a pat on the back.
$5 billion, just over $5 billion. Is that enough for a bloody nose?
To be honest, I think Google can brush the fine off. Far more important is the remedy. Yes. So the key question now is the Commission going to finish the job? Are they going to enforce their decision and actually make Google put in place an effective remedy? Now, the track record so far from the Google search decision, which was a year ago, is no. A year in, Google is still, I'm afraid, brazenly thumbing its nose at the Commission's decision. But that's going to be the battle for the autumn, because what the Commission now has to do is step in and charge them with not complying. Right, okay. So it rumbles on.
It does. Let's speak in the autumn, because that's going to
no doubt, I'll be back.
That's going to be a mighty big case there.
It is.
Siobhan and Raph, thanks, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for coming on in. You stay there, I'll do all the running around. We're going to touch on some of the other stories making business headlines all around the world. I like this one. Marriott Hotels has become the latest big company to get rid of plastic straws. Yeah, the world's biggest hotel chain says by this time next year it'll stop using them, as well as plastic drink stirrers. It's going to stop using them, and it's all of it. 6,500 hotels and resorts all around the world. And of course, all of this amid those environmental concerns. I can tell you who'll be happy is the turtles. AstraZeneca will increase its stockpile of drugs by about 20% in preparation for a no-deal Brexit. The European regulator has told firms to be ready for a possible hard Brexit in April, 2019, but a hard Brexit. AstraZeneca says it's already spent more than $50 million preparing for a no-deal Brexit. We'll keep across that one. Of course, we can't escape Brexit. EasyJet will complain to the European Commission about strikes by French air traffic controllers, which have used thousands of flights to be cancelled. Yeah, they've caused thousands of flights to be cancelled. EasyJet follows Ryanair and international airline group in IAG in preparing legal action over the strikes it says that amount to a breach of EU freedom of movement. Okay, let's go and check in on some of the markets around the world. We're going to start with the FTSE 100 right here in London. Last time I looked, continues marching higher. This is all helped by a weaker pound. Remember, a lot of the companies on the FTSE 100 earn their profits typically in dollars. So when they bring them back to here and the pound's down, they get more quid for their buck, if you know what I mean. Europe also higher, tracking that overnight rally on Wall Street. All of this is coming from the comments, the rally on Wall Street and these positives on the markets here, from the big boss, Jerome Powell, the big boss of America's central bank, the US Fed. He was saying some very positive words about the US economy, and everybody cheers that. It is the world's biggest. Tokyo, also high, actually closed up over more than a 1 month high, in fact. Exporters, car makers, and tech firms all getting a boost. That's after the dollar hit that 6-month high against the yen. So when the yen's lower, we buy more of that Japanese stuff, apparently. And the dollar went higher off the back of Powell's comments. Oil down, $71.55 a barrel. Boof, get rid of that. Okay, hey, if you were watching this show, hopefully you were, yesterday, even though we got biffed by President Obama after a little while. If you were watching, I was at the Farnborough International Air Show. There are around 1,500 exhibitors. Amongst them is the government of Washington State. Yeah, you know, that northwestern corner of the US is home to some of the world's biggest companies. Boeing, Amazon, Microsoft, just to name a few. And here's the thing that I learned, I didn't realize this, 1 in 3 jobs in that state there depend on international trade. So I asked Chris Green from the state's Commerce Department what they were doing to mitigate the impact of President Trump's trade tariffs.
So we're an incredibly globally focused industry, right? We've got these global brands like Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, and a really big agriculture sector. We're exporting the best cherries, apples, wine. So we've been very globally focused and engaged with our trade partners very intentionally for good reason, because it impacts so many of the jobs in Washington State. And unfortunately, recently, the president's erratic and unilateral actions have been doing some work to undermine some of the work that we do as a state to have these really intentional international relationships on trade. So yes, we do watch it closely and try to make sure we're continuing to be intentional by creating better relationships with our trade partners.
Yeah. Have you started seeing any impact at all in the state?
I don't know if we've seen. I couldn't say that we've seen direct impacts from a GDP standpoint. Washington's economy is pretty healthy. It's the top GDP increasing state in the country the last 2 years, mostly buoyed by aerospace and the tech industry. But in the last round of tariffs announced by some of our trade partners that were retaliatory, $1.8 billion worth of goods against Washington exports were tariffed. There was tariffs placed on those. So we are concerned about that. Additionally, if the president commits to what he said he would do, which is tariff an additional $200 billion in goods, we anticipate that the trade partners will react in turn. They will retaliate just like they would normally do. So these are things that we watch very carefully with the variety and the breadth and the depth of the industries that we have that do so many exports each year.
Yeah, I guess the flip side to this, because it could be a double whammy for Washington State, and I don't say that in a funny way, because you rely on China to ship all its stuff to the US. A lot of that goes through Washington, your seaports.
So our seaports between the Tacoma and Seattle ports, which is now the Northwest Seaport Alliance, is the third largest gateway to North America. So you've got New York, you've got LA, you've got the Pacific Northwest and the Seattle area. And so so a lot of the goods do come through our ports and go to the Midwest and places like that. And so that's soybeans, things like that are coming from the Midwest. We do pay attention to that and I have some concern there. Yeah.
If China ships less to the United States or ships less going through Washington, does that mean job losses?
Jobs certainly would be, we think, impacted. Trade is really important for the economy and important for jobs. Not only is it important because it creates jobs and there are direct jobs associated with trade, but we know that companies that engage in exports and imports pay more wages. We've done studies to determine this. And so we're actively, in my shop, we are actively encouraging small businesses to increase exports, be part of the global economy, because it's a good thing long-term for companies. It pays higher wages and it creates better diversity for them in their industry.
So let's see this. Why are you here at the Farnborough International Air Show?
Well, I'll tell you what, for us, despite turmoil, despite uncertainty there might be on the market, one of the most important things for Washington State as a state to do is to continue to be present at places like this, continue to be a part and engage in a global economy. We've been doing this show for over 20 years. This year alone, we have our highest, our largest delegation we've ever had. We have 60 people here, 14 small businesses, several folks that are at government levels. And so for us, being present, raising our flag profile as high as we can, engaging internationally is highly critical.
But just briefly, the sales pitch has got to be a lot more difficult today into this environment, because all of us outsiders are looking going, we don't know what's going to happen.
It is interesting. What's interesting is, aerospace, the demand for commercial aircraft continues to increase, right? So we know that there's going to be 30-some thousand odd planes created in the next 20 years. So there's activity, I think, still happening, albeit, folks have concerns and have questions and, don't know, what next week's going to bring. So it is a little bit different of an attitude.
Chris Green talking to me there, and of course Farnborough continues all this week, so we'll bring you any more action from that International Air Show. Now, as you might have seen, the 12 boys rescued from that flooded cave in Thailand have described being found as a moment of miracle. But for the tech giant or entrepreneur and the big Tesla boss, Elon Musk, their ordeal has proved to be quite a headache for him. Indeed. Let's go straight over to Blakey, Paul Blake, who is on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Hey, Blakey, so just for our audience around the world, the British diver, one of the British divers who found the boys and helped rescue them, basically, Elon Musk, had a bit of a Twitter battle, called him a pedo. So calling somebody a pedo like this makes for big headlines, but it certainly makes for big PR problems for Tesla.
And it's definitely not the first time that Elon Musk has gotten in trouble for his Twitter activity. This goes back to just after the boys were discovered in the cave. Elon Musk offered to send a submarine, that he was going to eventually have his team build a miniature submarine to go into the cave to rescue the boys one by one. Well, they didn't end up using that. The boys were rescued by cave divers. One of the cave divers heavily involved in that effort was Vernon Unsworth, a British caver. He said that Elon Musk's attempt to bring that submarine to the cave was a PR stunt. Well, that certainly got under the skin of Elon Musk, who called him a pedo guy. Today, Elon Musk apologizing for those comments, and that comes after criticism for how it might affect his companies.
Indeed. Hey, Blakey, great stuff as always. Sorry it was short and sweet today, but got to rock on. Talk to you soon, probably tomorrow. Paul Blake on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Hey, it's that time of the program. Let's go and take a look at what's trending online around the world. Did you know President Trump is the single biggest political advertiser on Facebook? Yep. The New York Times reports findings by a group of researchers from New York University who used Facebook's own data to arrive at the results. Mr. Trump and his Political Action Committee has spent something like $247,000 on ads on the social network since early May. There you go. Hey, 2 Air China pilots have had their licenses revoked after a mid-air emergency caused by vaping. It's true. The Guardian reports how one of the pilots tried to turn off a fan to stop his e-cigarette, well, it's not smoke, is it, but the vape reaching the passenger cabin. But instead, he knocked off the air conditioning, causing a drop in the oxygen levels. Oxygen masks then dropped down in the cabin, and the plane was forced into an emergency descent because of vaping. And lastly, Wall Street Journal writes how supersonic travel could be back. Yeah, investors are pushing plane makers like Boeing to develop new technology to make flying faster than the Concorde. They want to make that viable. We are talking Mach 5. Yeah, 5 times the speed of sound. I could go home to Sydney for lunch. Hey, coming up, we're going to speak to this psychologist right here who uses science to improve performance in the workplace by focusing on personality traits. Wait till he gets his head around mine. See you after the break. Okay, let's get a little bit more on the Farnborough Air Show. One of the big earners is cargo. You know, $7 trillion worth of the stuff is moved by plane every single year. That includes 1.1 million smartphones a day. But what if you got something a bit bigger to move? Here's Theo Leggett.
Air cargo is something many of us don't really think about, but in fact it is a very large industry. It's worth about $7 trillion a year. Now, a lot of that cargo is carried around in normal planes on flights that you or I might take. But what if you need to carry something a lot bigger and a lot heavier? Mining equipment, for example. Well, then you're going to need something a bit more like this.
That's how you do it. Hey, what does it take to get to the top and be successful at work? Well, a lot of it comes down to personality traits, according to the latest research. It's all about qualities such as high adjustment and risk approach. You got those? Then apparently you've got the golden ticket. Hey, let's find out, because I want to talk to Ian McRae, who is Director of High Potential Psychologists. You're a psychology.
Yep.
You're a psychologist yourself. I mentioned 2 of those. What's the other one?
Conscientiousness is one of the most important ones.
Yeah, the word that
ambiguity.
Yeah, there you go. So briefly, what are all these different traits?
So these are personality traits that are really consistent ways of thinking, acting, behaving at work. And so because they're consistent over long term, over lifetime, we can really use those to predict not just performance, but potential. So for example, if you're very conscientious, you're self-motivated, you're well organized, you're good at long-term planning, that's going to help you at work, right? If you're on time, you're getting things done, and you can do things yourself, then that really helps.
How do you measure? How do you measure that?
Well, we ask people. So we've got a questionnaire that is one way of measuring. So 78 questions.
Because you've come up with a scientific formula, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we can ask you, were you on time today?
Yeah.
Are you usually on time?
No. Yes, I am.
Well,
We have a meeting in the morning. I've got to be here. Yes, I am.
Yeah, exactly. So if we ask people about these kind of things, are you good at organizing yourself?
Yep.
Motivating yourself in the long term?
Yeah.
There you go.
Right. I was going to say, yep.
Yeah, so you're probably quite conscientious.
So you came up with this formula. You and a colleague?
Colleague Adrian Furnham, who used to be at University
so you've come
College
up, and is this all in this book? You've got
it's
a book
all in the book,
High Potential. So you then, what, you sell this formula, if you will, to businesses?
Yeah, exactly. We use it in selection and leadership development, especially with leaders, because we can see kind of the optimal traits that leaders have of these different personality traits. So
And that might be a silly question, I'm not too sure, but do these personality traits vary globally? Like one culture is different?
they do to a certain extent. So most of our research has been done in Europe and North America, and we find they're really, really consistent. But even we just did some research in Canada and North America, and we found adjustment tends to be a bit higher in Canada than the UK.
And businesses, since, I mean, because I think you said it's about $100 US dollars a test,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yeah.
Are they knocking down the door? Are they eager? Because there's an older system in place that I think 9 out of 10 American businesses use. The
Myers-Briggs.
The Myers-Briggs one, yeah.
Yeah, which was developed ages ago, and the science behind it isn't great.
Right.
So it doesn't have any kind of predictive ability for performance or potential. It's kind of an interesting one that's useful to kind of have a conversation with people about their personality. But we've got really good evidence and data that this actually predicts leadership potential, leadership performance, and we find a really clear, consistent pattern where leaders and senior leaders tend to have higher levels of these traits. And then we've mapped those optimal zones for what is.
And just very briefly, is it rare to have all of them?
It's rare to have 6 out of 6, so
Yeah.
fewer than 1%. Most people, 20%, 30% of people will have 1 or 2 in the optimal range. But CEOs are rare. High-performing CEOs are even more rare. So those personality traits are also rare.
Okay. Ian, great stuff.
Yeah.
I reckon some of these people who've got some of these traits probably at play on Wall Street. You and I are going to go to
Yeah.
Wall Street right now just to have a quick flash, because I think the markets are up. Yeah, they're not doing too bad. Some good results from Morgan Stanley. Hey, that's it. Oh, United Airlines as well. Hey, I'm back same time, same place tomorrow. Follow me on Twitter at BBC Aaron. Philip is at the top of the hour with Impact. See you tomorrow. Thank you.